enveloped, and the size is roughly like 200 nanometer in size. And there are differences between the previous SARS-CoV viruses and SARS-CoV-2 viruses in the genome. Many deletions and insertions happened in the novel coronaviruses during the evolution. This is just to show you before going to the real-time PCR, like there are some important views. So this coronavirus comes under nidovirus, which means a nested because of the subgenomic mRNA, which is usually produced by coronavirus. That is the reason why it is called as nidovirus. And if you look at the coronavirus is generally divided into alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, basically based on the genome. They classify this. And very important thing is already we have 6 already existing coronavirus in the past, which mainly affecting the human. There are many coronavirus which are affecting animals too, but we mainly focusing on human. And the 4 are, which is like very not infectious. They usually cause a common cold. But the SARS-CoV-2 and MERS-CoV, which was in the previous one, they are much dangerous compared to the other 4. So now the reason one is novel coronavirus 2019, which was emerged from Wuhan, China. And before just going into it, just quickly, this is the Baltimore classification. This is simply to share that the viruses as a positive sense RNA. So the Baltimore classification is basically based on how this viruses, when they enter into a human, how they convert into mRNA, because they need to produce protein, right? So how do they produce mRNA? Based on that strategy, Baltimore is classified into 6 different groups, like whether it is a DNA virus or single stranded DNA virus, double stranded RNA virus, single stranded negative sense RNA. So here in this slide, I wanted to share with you that this virus has a positive sense single stranded RNA, okay, non-segmented. Some of the viruses may have segmented RNAs, and this has a non-segmented RNA, positive sense RNA. Okay, this is very important because then later you will understand why it is very important for the diagnostic point of view. So this is just to share with you that the genome structure of the novel coronavirus. They basically have 16 non-structural proteins, which is mainly enzymes, which helps in replicase of these viruses, and many structural proteins are there. If you look at generally, they have over of 1A, 1AB, where the main target of the real-time PCR is RDRP, RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. These enzyme which converts directly mRNA into, this mRNA into a negative sense RNA. From that, again, you will get a replicate of many RNA. And you have a spike protein, E gene. Again, E gene is one target, and M protein and N protein. It's a nucleocapsid protein. So this is a phylogenetic tree which shows the comparison of different coronaviruses genome. And if you look at very interestingly, right, like there are many similarities between these viruses. There is a commonality, I would say. So based on this, even you can design a primer specifically for a beta coronavirus or alpha coronavirus, or specifically to SARS-CoV viruses like that. So this is just as I said, like this is a genome organization of a novel coronavirus. Basically, they have 16 non-structural proteins, which are mainly involved in the replicase of these in this virus, especially protease and RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. Apart from that, you also have structural proteins, spike, which binds to ACE2 receptors of the human lung, type 2 cells, and membrane proteins and nucleocapsid protein, which is very essential for the packaging of this viral RNA into the shell, and then envelope gene. All right. So in this, some of the proteins we are gonna the gene coding for this protein we are gonna target as for the real-time PCR. So whatever I'm gonna share with you today is like basically what are the regimens or guidelines given by World Health Organization, as well as ICMR, National Institute of Virology, as well as CDC. And if you look at like there are different tests available as of today, like for COVID-19 diagnosis. So one is antigen-based diagnosis. As of now, there are not many antigen-based tests available in the world. because they're able to tracing the which antigen is really coming up during the infections. Like in case of dengue, we used to screen the NS gene, NS antigen for the dengue screening, right? Similarly, there is no proven antigen which is really secreting during the infection in throat or nasal secretions. And the next one is you can see antibody screening. The ELISA kits also slowly coming up. And you might have heard of rapid testing. The rapid testing is basically based on the antibody screening of IgM and IgG. And these are like not really, you can diagnose the disease as such. So you can use it for a prevalence study. Like say, for example, a person is already infected or not. So that you can see, but not really at the time of infection. It is very difficult to say that the person is having an active infection. So there are some criteria to say that the person is having active infection. So coming to the PCR, the real-time PCR is now currently as a gold standard method, where like we are using, every hospitals are using to this test for screening of coronaviruses. It is very sensitive. Even the early stage you can diagnose it. There are limitations as well, because any test, if you consider, there are limitations are there. So in this test also you may have some limitations. I will show you like some of the limitations, how it can affect your results and other things. Apart from that, you can also screen for biomarkers, like as you know that this disease involves a lot of cytokine storm. So by screening some of the specific IL-6 or some of the specific biomarkers, you can screen them, and then can really come up saying that there is a coronavirus in these patients. So people are working on that. As such now, like we don't have any specific biomarker model for diagnosing the COVID-19. And this is very important. There are many cases which showed chest X-ray and CT scan positive, but real-time negative. So many countries now started doing a kind of hybridization test or synergistic test by using both chest X-ray as well as real-time PCR. Sometimes chest X-ray can show clearly the clinical features of typical coronaviruses, but sometimes real-time PCR can be negative, because based on many factors, like how you collect the samples and what is the viral load, and so many factors are there. And so this also should be used as a clinical diagnostic point of view. So moving on to, like, if somebody of you like interested in setting up the diagnostic lab for COVID-19 in your area or in your state, so what you can do is, first you have to set up the lab. I will show you what are the essential things to set up the lab as per the WHO or ICMR guideline. And once you set up the lab, you need to run a test run. So test run in the sense, they will send you a positive and negative control along with all the reagents which is necessary for COVID-19 screening. Once you run the test, you need to send the curve, that is whichever like positive control, negative control curve you got it, you have to send it to NIV and ICMR. So then they will get the approval for you to start the diagnosis of COVID-19. Once you get the approval, your green signal is there, so you can just start the COVID-19 diagnosis. At the same time, you should take care of many things, because these are like really dangerous. They may cause spread of the disease. So for any nucleic acid amplification test in COVID-19 related things, you need a few things in the laboratory. These are very essential. If you have all these things, you can really start the COVID-19 screening by real-time PCR. And I'll just go quickly one by one. So one is a clean room facility. As you know that because of the negative pressure, the air will not be escaped from the room. So a clean room is essential, which is a BSL-2 facility would be really great for diagnosis. If you're going for culture, BSL-3 is required. So then this is very, very essential. You need personal protective equipments like N95 mask and other aprons and like that. And then you need a BSL-2 cabinets, 2 numbers. One is for virus isolation, RNA isolation. Other one is for PCR mix. So this is here one very important point is that one BSL cabinet should have the virus burn unit, because if some viruses escape through the HEPA filter, it can be easily burned when they pass through the virus burn unit. And cooling centrifuge is essential for RNA extraction, as all of you know that. Yes, RNA extraction kit you need. As per WHO, there are a list of kits available. I can show you like in a couple of slides later. WHO and NIV recommended RNA extraction kits you can use, and RNase inhibitor spray, because as you know that our hands and every surfaces has RNAs which can inhibit really the RNA we extract from the viruses. So if you use these are just like that RNase zap, which is from Thermo. So you can just spray them like how you use ethanol wipes or something like that. So it really inhibit all the enzymes on the surface. So your RNA will be safe. So real-time PCR reagents and other kits which is necessary for the screening. Again, this is many of kits are approved by NIV and ICMR. Those things alone you should use. And of course, you need a real-time PCR which is connected to a computer, and real-time PCR tubes and 1.5 ml, 2 ml tubes. Here, one important thing is that please make sure that the real-time PCR tubes, what you're going to use, is compatible with your machine or not. That is very, very, very essential, because there are unique machines which will allow only specific tubes, which is given by the company, because it's a closed system, it's not an open system. So you should be aware that the compatibility of the tubes which you're going to use. And SpinWin for PCR tubes. Why SpinWin is very essential for PCR tube is that in case of real-time PCR, it's very, very essential that there should not be any air bubble. So if you have an air bubble, it will really interfere, because in later couple of slides, I'll show you why the bubbles will have an interference, because the light will pass through it. Once the light passes through the air bubbles, it will be really doing a problem. Again, you need a nitrile glove, and then pipettes, a different range, and tips again for different range. And very important point here, tip is you should have use filter tips, because of aerosol generations there will be a carryover contamination. So please use filter tips, tissue paper and absorbents. If there's any spillage or something like that, you can really wipe it off with disinfectants. And discarding jars with disinfectants, you can use sodium hypochlorite 0.1% or 60 to 70% ethanol as per the WHO recommendation. Yeah, this I said already. And PCR grade water you can use, which is necessary for the master mix preparation. And discarding bins for PP and other gloves, because you need to autoclave them or incinerate them after you come out of the room. And fumigation system, after once everything is done, you can do a fumigation. And then you need a 4 degrees Celsius, -20 and -80 to store the samples and RNA extracted materials and like that. And essentially the last one is the VTM viral transport medium and collection swab you need for the collecting these swabs. So I'll just quickly just show you like a few things, very important things. You need essentially a clean room. A clean room is looks like this. This is essentially like the entire room is very clean, no dust particle, anything can enter, and again at the same time, none of the dust particle can come out of this room. This is how the scientists or people who are working in the coronavirus will work inside the lab. And so basically how this works is there will be an HEPA filter on the top of the roof. So there will be a fan which sucks air from the outside and filter through the HEPA filter. So the HEPA filter has some size. Excuse me. So HEPA filter has some size, so 2 to 3 microns. So when they filter, the clean air will come. So inside when you work on the laboratory, the air will get contaminated. Again, they will suck through the side walls, and then again they filter through the HEPA filter and then go out as a clean air. So this method can really help you to keep the environment safe, yourself safe, as well as the sample safe. So everything will be safe. So this is how it is. So from the top, these green color and blue colors are showing that the air is entering and it is getting contaminated. Again, it goes through the slit on the sides and it will be escaped through HEPA filter and it is get cleared. So this is just to show you how a typical COVID-19 setup should be. So you ultimately need a 3-room or 4-room facility, pre-PCR environment, post-PCR environment. So one room is for specimen collection. The next one is for RNA extraction room. So one important thing is that the direction of the flow should be unidirectional. When a person moves from the inside the laboratory, it should be a unidirectional movement. And this is the area where BSL2 facility, BSL2 cabinet is there. You can extract RNA or DNA, whatever you want. And then you can move to the PCR master mix room, where the PCR master mix is prepared separately. And then once all the RNA is added, then they move to the thermal cycling room, where they can fix up all the mix and everything, set the cycles and then go and then get the results. So once everything is done, they can move out through this window. So this is what very essential for a setup, how COVID-19 BSL2 facility can be set up. So one important thing is here is like, whenever you extract the RNA in the RNA extraction room, as soon as you extract it, you can store it in -80 inside the RNA extraction room. Then don't take the extracted RNA to the PCR master mix room. This is very essential because this room should be very, very clean. You should mix only the master mix and allocate into the tubes. If you have a facility, you can allocate one more room where you can really mix your extracted RNA and your to your master mix. Because one important thing here is, if one sample comes here, the spillage happens, then there will be a carryover contamination. It can show some of the negative patient also as a positive. So you should be very clear that you should mix only the master mix in the PCR room, not anything else. And one more important thing is that don't add a positive control in the master mix room or in the RNA extraction room. Why? Because these positive controls are artificially made, or maybe like a cloned gene of coronavirus, a specific coronavirus. So in that case, if you do some spillage here, then there will be again carryover contamination, so that entire patient will show as a positive. So there are chances. So we should avoid maximum error as much as possible, right? So these are like very essential. The moment you want to go into the extraction room or PCR room, you need to be well equipped. You have to have a personal protective equipment as well as N95 mask. Very, very essential is you have to have a face shield, because many of you may be working on the lab. You may aware that anytime it can have a spillage or splash. So if it goes to your mucus, because you have masked with the N95 mask, your nose and your both oral and nasal mucosa is protected, but your cornea is exposed. So through that mucosal layer, it can easily enter. So the face shield is very, very important, or goggle, a very tight goggle should be essential, and you have to have this complete protection because of the aerosol generation from the samples. And you can have this room for the PP and once you completely set, you can have, like, I'm not sure how it is possible for many of the laboratory to have this, but if you have this, it's really good. And you can have a shower room. This is a hair shower room where, like, once you go before into the lab, you can take a shower, so all your dirt will be cleaned, so you can go to the laboratory. And this is a pause box, just to show that you should not take the samples as such when you go inside the clean room. So what you can do is, there will be a pause box in the sample collection room, where physicians or technicians, whoever collected the samples, they will come and put into the one door, the double door pause box. So once they put it to the one window, the other window you can't open it. So it is tightly sealed, and this small box itself will act as a clean room. So none of the air from outside can enter into the clean room. So in this way, you can take a very good precaution that none of the virus can escape from inside the lab to the outside of the environment. And the next room is, the first room is, we saw sample collection room. The next room is the RNA extraction room. So here you can do the RNA extraction as per the procedure given by the extraction kit. And once RNA extraction is over, so here, like how through again another pause box, you can transfer the sample to the RNA extraction room. And once RNA extraction is done, you can go for the next room, a PCR master mix room, where you can mix all your PCRs as per the recommendation by the kits. And once master mix is ready, then you can add your samples. Once sample is added, the next room is the real-time PCR room, where you go and set the reaction cycles and everything, and you start the run. It's very easy, actually. So ultimately, just put it in a one slide. So what you need is a 4-room. One room is for sample collection. The next room is for the RNA extraction. The next room is for PCR master mix. The another room is for a real-time PCR running and analysis and so on. So totally, you need a 4-room. Yeah. So far I just covered you like how a diagnostic lab should be. So the next thing is sample collection. This is very, very essential because the way you collect the sample, the way your results will be. So how good your collection is, right? So there are a lot of chances for false negative results. A really positive patient can go into a negative, and you can make them go to the society and maybe lead to a community spread. So this is very, very essential. So when you talk about COVID-19 diagnosis, there are three steps essentially involved. One is sample collection, the other one is RNA extraction, and then the last one is one-step RT-PCR and real-time PCR, right? So these are the three essential steps involved in the COVID-19 diagnosis. So moving on to the sample collection. So sample collection should be done in a very precise manner. I'll show a video now. So the main very important thing is that we'll collect the swab from two areas. One is oropharyngeal swab, other one is nasopharyngeal swab. The main important thing here is you should not use the calcium alginate swabs or wooden shaft swabs, because they really inhibit the PCRs, because the calcium alginate can interfere with your PCR mix, right? So, so very important thing is that please make sure that you collect the samples from exactly from a posterior pharyngeal wall as well as nasal pharyngeal wall. Why? Because if you happen to touch tongue or the other sides of the mouth, then it will be getting contaminated with the other common oral microbes present in that, because they may interfere with your results. So that's why you have to take just posterior, exactly from posterior wall, or if you see that some tonsils are infected, even if you can just touch the tonsils and take it, right? But you should not touch tongue or cheek or teeth. Again, nasal swabs you should take, nasopharyngeal, again from the perfect nasopharyngeal region. So I'll just show you how to collect the samples. So when you want to collect the samples, first educate the patients like what you're going to do to them, and you need to be completely protected yourself with the PPE. So don't give any compromisation in this PPE protection, because otherwise you will be getting infected. So you need to have N95 respirator mask and apron and goggle, that is shield and glove. If you want, you can even have a two gloves. So I'm not going to show you like how to wear them. I just keep focusing on how to collect the samples as such. Okay. So first, to make the patient comfortable, if you want, you can just tell them to sit comfortably in some place, and then like this you can hold the patients, or you can raise their head on a wall if you want. So then you tell them what you're going to do now in a few minutes. So this is how you should take the patients. This is a procedure how you have to collect. So actually you don't need to collect, the ENT or physicians will collect, because they need to collect the samples. And once you started collecting the sample, you have to take the swabs. It's artificial cotton. As I said, you should not use a calcium alginate swab or wooden stick, because they really the wooden stick do harm to patient, and the calcium alginate will really interfere with your results, right? And so the position is very important. You have to hold it like this, because you can roll the swab, because you can collect as much as possible, right? So you can allow free rotation of the thing. So if you hold like this, it is a wrong, because you can't able to rotate the swabs. So this is the way you have to insert. So you have to go like this and go 5 to 6 centimeter or 2 inch, and once you feel the resistance, right? So beyond that you can't go, so which means that you achieve the nasopharyngeal region. So now you can slowly rotate it, so that you can collect the viruses from that area, right? So once you collected, so that, as I said, like 5 to 6 centimeter or 2 inch you have to go, because then only you are touching the nasopharyngeal region. So what happened, many people just like that insert and take it out, so there will not be any much viral load, then the patient will show as a negative, definitely. So you have to carefully take it, And don't keep the cotton swab anywhere, and just put it directly into the viral transport medium and put it in a proper storage. And if you look at the oropharyngeal swab, first you keep the tongue depressors and tell the patients to say ah, so that you can visibly see the posterior pharyngeal wall, right? So now he will be showing like how to do that in a patient. So now he is with a tongue depressor, he made a tongue to depress, and then now it's going to posterior pharyngeal wall, and then now once you touch the posterior pharyngeal wall, little bit twist it, so that you can collect a maximum amount of viruses from that area, right? So now he's collecting the thing. So one important thing is when you collect like this, the patient is automatically able to cough or sneeze. So you should be completely protected with the PPE, otherwise you will get infected. And once everything is done, put it in a cover, transport to the laboratory for the extraction, right? So this is very essential, and as per the WHO guideline, if you want to transport these samples to other laboratories for diagnosis, you don't have a facility. So there are criteria need to be followed by WHO recommendation. So this is a list. So if you are using some of these samples, you need to show them in some specified temperature. There are like it should be shifted in within few days. Otherwise, the RNA will get degraded and you will not have any good results, right? Okay. So the next thing is, so far we saw how to collect the swabs, and why do we need to extract the RNA? Why? Because these viruses are known that it's a positive sense RNA, so that we don't need a positive sense. We need only, we don't need a DNA. We need a positive sense RNA. So that's why we are going for an RNA extraction. And RNA extraction is very simple. You can extract just like that. So by vortexing the swabs and take the reaction from the VTM and then put into the viral RNA extraction kit. So you have to be very clear that there are many extraction kits keep coming to each laboratory. You should strictly, specifically adhere to the protocol given by the manufacturer. You should not deviate it. So slowly follow them, and I have seen that many laboratory are adopted to one protocol. They definitely next week again the next kit comes. So you should basically the principle is the same. The simple principle is we are going to lyse the virus, take the RNA, capture the RNA, clean the RNA, and use them for a PCR, right? So there are many RNA extraction kits are available. QIAGEN, from Thermo, Promega. So you can really see this. So we also in our laboratory we have a couple of kits. So you could see them, like these are the kits available. So there are many kits: Promega, Thermo, and then Maggenome. You have QIAGEN, Fevrogen from Taiwan. So there are a lot of kits available. So one thing you should be aware that whether these kits are approved by ICMR. That is very important, because some of the kits may not have that efficiency to extract the viral RNA. So you should be aware about that. So here I'll show you like how to extract the viral RNA. So the virus as a positive sense RNA. So we need the RNA, and then once you extract the RNA out, you will be converting them to a cDNA. Why? Because once again. So why? Because you need to, I'll just go back. So RNA need to be converted to cDNA, and then only you can do a PCR. Why? Because RNA, all of you are aware that RNA is very unstable. So you need to convert them into cDNA. So then once your cDNA is converted, it is really stable, then you can go for a PCR. So the conversion of RNA to cDNA is the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, right? So many people get confused with RT-PCR and real-time PCR. Please remember that RT-PCR is the reverse transcriptase PCR. Real-time PCR has to be spelled as real-time PCR. So these two are different. RT-PCR is different, real-time PCR is different. Or you can call the real-time PCR as a qPCR. So I'll show you like how to extract RNA. So once you receive these swabs in a laboratory, you need to extract the RNA from them. So first you collect the adequate amount what recommended by the extraction protocol. Take the viral transport medium because the virus is present in that. And first thing is you need to add a lysis buffer. So lysis buffer adds some reagents like phenol, guanidine. So once you add them, they will do the lysis of the viruses and whatever the cell present in the VTM medium, even the human cells. Even the human cells RNA is essential for us to validate the results. So this is a virus, the reagents act on that, and once acting on that, they will make the virus to burst and the RNA is released now. So what we need is the RNA. The next is the spin column. This is the principle involved in the RNA extraction here. So this is a kind of column chromatography principle. You need to spin them. So this is the column where it is as a silica in it. Silica has an affinity for DNA and RNA. So they will go and specifically attach to the silica. The other protein material, shell material, everything will wash away. So now all the protein has gone. So you have to throw off this flow and do the wash by using a wash buffer. Though usually wash buffer contains ethanol, different percentage of ethanol. Again, you do the spinning. So the excess, if any excess protein is there, they also will go away. So like this, you need to do like two times or thrice you can do. So your RNA will not wash away because they are firmly adhered to the silica. So once washing is over, finally elution. Here, one important point I want to tell you is, maybe I'm not sure how many of you are aware. So when you do the elutions, right, please remember that you take your tip as such straight manner and go to the near to the membrane, silica membrane, just put on top of the silica membrane. Why? Because now this elution buffer will interact with the silica and detach the RNA from the silica. So you need to expose the entire surface. If you put it in the sides, what happens? The elution buffer will go sit on the sides so that your RNA will not come out, which means that only some of the RNA will come out, some of the RNA still adhered to the silica membrane, right? So like that, in a state you have to put it. So then spin it, your all RNA will come out now. So when the water goes inside, the elution buffer goes inside, the RNA's interaction between RNA silica is disturbed and the RNA is come out. Now your pure RNA, mRNA is there, which contains both the viral RNA as well as the human RNA, everything. So now it is ready. Next thing is we need to prepare the reaction mix for the real-time PCR to do, right? So this RNA will contain both the human RNA as well as the viral RNA. I'll tell you like what is important of both. Okay, so next thing is we are going to go for a real-time PCR. So before going into real-time PCR, I'll just tell you one important thing is that whatever we do in the laboratory is just mimicking the in vivo mechanism, how the DNA replication takes place. So I'll tell you the correlations. So what we need for real-time PCR or PCR is the template, a viral template, or whatever the template you need a template, which is DNA or RNA, whatever it is. But the same what we're going to use in the tube also. And you need all the nucleotides, adenine, thymine, cytosine that we add as a DNTPs. And you need a DNA polymerase. In vivo replication is DNA polymerase. In vitro also we are using same DNA polymerase. And in vivo you have RNA primer, but in vitro we have a stable DNA primer because RNA primers are unstable, right? And other important thing is helicase. Generally in vivo helicase unwind the DNA, but in case of in vitro we can't use helicase. There are PCR which can use helicase, but they are expensive. So what we are using is a thermal. So thermal temperature does the purpose of helicase, so they unwind the DNA. So this just to show you that we are mimicking the in vivo conditions and making the in vitro replication of the DNA. It's very simple. So I'll just show you a video of how this PCR reactions takes place, because once you understand this PCR reaction, then it is really helpful for you to understand the real-time PCR. So this can be used to detect a pathogen, bacteria, or identify individuals, DNA fingerprinting, and many on. So the moment you get the sample, You extract the DNA, any sample it is, and then go for PCR. Your target will be amplified in many numbers. And then finally with that, you can identify whether it's a coronavirus or human or whatever it is. It's very simple, right? That will be exponential increase of your target. So imagine that this is a PCR thermal cycler where the temperature keeps shifting in the cycles. So this is a PCR tube where we are mixing our DNA, which contains our target, a primer. Primer is very essential to start the specific target, DNTPs and polymerase. So you're mixing everything together and put it into the PCR mix, and then the PCR machine is ready now. So now we are zooming into the tubes now. So this is the template DNA or RNA, whatever it is, if you want to. So the moment you keep the denaturation, so these are the 3 steps essentially involved in PCR. Denaturation, as I said, helicase function is done by high heat, unwinds the DNA because hydrogen bonds are breaking from the DNA. And then now, here very important thing is once the polymerase comes here, when the unwinding happens, they are just blind because they can't start from anywhere like where they want. So they need somebody to start because the 3' OH they need to attach the next bases. For that, we are adding a specific primers. In coronaviruses, there are many specific primers, RDRP, NG, and so on. So the moment you go to annealing, that favors the attachment of your short oligonucleotide specific to the target region, complementary to target region, and your polymerase will bind, and then they keep adding the DNTP by reading the template strand. So by this method, they'll be keep adding your bases. So again, you see the next cycle, cycle 2, again the same unwinding will take place. Again, your primers will come and bind during annealing, and your polymerase will come and bind now. Extension is the temperature where like your real extension of your DNA target takes place, right? So slowly they are adding. So the green color is your target actually. So the red color indicates the whole genome. So again, the next cycle, 3rd cycle, yeah, again the denaturation. So the cycle keep repeating and repeating. So you can fix the cycles, 40 cycles, 45 cycles, 30 cycles, 35 cycles, whichever is recommended by your manufacturers, right? The kit you're going to use. So clear that like at the cycle 3, you have a specific target. So the cycle 3, your specific target is generated. So now you see how rapidly they are increasing. So cycle 4, 8 copies of your target DNA. And cycle 5, yes. So it started. You see how drastically the number going up. So it crossed lakhs. You see how fast it is. So within a few minutes, you will have the enormous amount of your target DNA. So why do we need to do the PCR? Because generally there are limitations. You can't detect a single copy of a virus, single DNA copy or a single RNA copy. It's very, very difficult that we don't have any technology to see a single DNA apart from sequencing, right? So here we are increasing the targets into a detectable limit. That's why we are going for a PCR. So just to tell you what is the difference between the conventional PCR and real-time PCR, why we are using real-time PCR. Many people may be like thinking that why people are not going for conventional PCR, which is much easier than the real-time PCR. So there are many advantages when you're looking about real-time PCR. So generally PCR and real-time PCR both are same. There is only one difference. If you look at PCR and real-time PCR, we are using template DNA or RNA, yes. We are using oligonucleotide, and that is primers, yes. In both the cases we are using primers. In real-time PCR, you may be using additional probe also sometime. So you can use probe as well as just primers also can be possible in real-time PCR. Of course, yes, DNA polymerase in both. Of course, DNTP in both, and buffers, yes. Both of them need buffers. The only difference is that in case of PCR, you don't use any fluorescent dye, whereas in case of real-time PCR, you use a fluorescent dye to detect the amplification. So each cycle you will know whether amplification is taking place or not. That's why you can really see them through your eye, whether the amplification is taking place or not. That's why it's called real-time PCR. So once, if the reaction takes place in a tube, you get the fluorescence out of the tube that is recorded through the camera, right? So this is just to show you that like how long it will take to do a conventional PCR. The moment you load the PCR, you need to prepare the gel and buffers, run the gel, and then look at the UV, and then finally you see each well which is positive and negative like that, right? It's very tedious. Conventional PCR is tedious, and it almost take 5 to 6 hours to run one sample. Whereas in case of real-time PCR, it just take 30 minutes to 1 hour. You can literally see the moment it started amplifying. Say within a 10 cycle, you know that whether your patient is positive or not. That quick it is. So maybe to take 10 minutes, 10 cycle, it may take 10 minutes or 15 minutes. By the time you know the result, that's the advantage of real-time PCR. You can really visualize the peaks and say which patient is positive. So this is just to show that if you want to see the reduction limit of a PCR and real-time PCR, you see the 5 cycle, 10 cycle, 15 cycle, you will not, amplification is taking place, but still you can't be able to visually see the bands because the efficiency of a dye what you are using is not up to the level of reduction. So at the 20th cycle, you can see a slight band, and then lightly the intensities keep going up. So at 45 cycles, you can see a really good bands. So the PCRs are end-stage analysis, endpoint analysis, whereas in real-time PCR, you can see very quickly in the exponential phase itself. The moment your fluorescence keep increasing, you can really detect it. So very easy it is. So before going into the real-time PCR, there are some terms you should know about the real-time PCR. What it is target. What is target? So your gene of interest, whatever gene of interest you are going to detect, it is the target. Say for example, in all coronavirus, we are doing E gene, N gene, RDRP, that is RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, S gene, spike protein. So these are the genes which is used as a target for diagnosis of COVID-19. And then endogenous control or IC, internal control or internal amplification control, which is nothing but host gene. So you can select any host gene as an endogenous control. Why? Because this is very essential for the QC. Whether your RNA extraction is very good, you have enough material for the PCR to go. So if there is any inhibitor present in your sample, this endogenous control will not show any curve, because as you are aware that we are taking the sample from the human. So when the moment you take it from the posterior pharyngeal wall or nasopharyngeal wall, absolutely you will get some epithelial cells, right? So these epithelial cells RNA will come out. So those genes we will detect definitely. So 100%, irrespective of whether patient is positive or negative, this endogenous control should show positive. So that's why we are running a endogenous control, just to do a sample QC. To say that there is no inhibitor present in the sample. So whatever the results we got is the real results. Master mix, as I said, it has a DNTP, Tagpol, buffers, and MgCl2. MgCl2 acts as a cofactor, right? And then primers, target specific, complementary oligonucleotides. These are very specific, it should be very specific to the targets. And probes. So apart from primers, you also need oligos, because these are along with the reporter dyes. I'll show in a couple of slides. And you need a RT enzyme, which is reverse transcriptase enzyme, to convert RNA to cDNA. And you need a ROX, passive reference dye. And you need a replicates also. You should know what is replicates. So there are two replicates. Very interesting thing is one is biological replicate, other one is experimental replicate. What do you mean by biological replicate is that, so when you take from a same patient, two different swabs, just in order to ensure that whatever the results what you're getting is really correct or not. Say for example, if the collection is not proper, one sample will show positive, another sample will show negative. So in sometimes we generally in our laboratory we use biological replicate as well. What do you mean by experimental replicate is that the moment you extract the RNA from a single collected sample, you can do twice, so that if there is any minor variation due to the experimental procedures, you can really look at it, is there any variations or not. And you should know what is non-template control, because in that we will not add any template, just only the master mix. And you should know what is positive control, where you will add all the positive genes to check whether all your reactions gone perfectly fine or not. Positive control is very essential, because when you mix master mix, right, some of the primers if you missed, or some of the essential enzymes you've missed, your positive control will not show any bands. So you can assume that the reaction is not gone well, so you have to repeat it. So these controls are essential, not only for real-time PCR. Any test you do, you essentially need controls. So as I said, you need a master mix, which contains primers, other stuffs like DNTP, Taq polymerase, RT mix, and finally you need to mRNA add. And this involves two steps. One is the reverse transcriptase steps, and other Taq polymerase steps. So first, we will convert them RNA to cDNA, make them stable, and then we'll go with the real-time PCR, right? So it's a two step involved in the detection. So in case of reverse translate, what happened is that, as I said, the viral RNA is very, very unstable. The moment you open out of the cell, they start degrading. So you will lose a lot of viral copy of mRNA. So what you need to do is convert the RNA to cDNA by using an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. I can call them as RNA dependent DNA polymerase. So by depending on the RNA, they convert into a DNA. These are the enzymes which convert them into a stable cDNA form. So this is the first step in the COVID-19 diagnosis. We convert the entire RNA. So viral RNA as well as human RNA, everything will be converted to a cDNA, right? And then they are stable now. So this will take 30 minutes initially. So in case of COVID diagnosis, what we are doing is one-step RT-PCR. So this is very important who are working on COVID-19 diagnosis. What do you mean by one-step RT-PCR is that we mix everything together at one tube. Say, for example, gene specific for COVID-19 diagnosis, E gene, RDRP, or whatever gene you're going to use, those genes, DNTP, PCR water, reverse transcriptase enzyme, Taq polymerase enzyme, RNA template, buffers, everything will mix in a one single tube. So this master mix comes as the whole thing as a master mix, which contain all the enzymes, DNA, Taq polymerase, DNTP, primers, and everything. You don't need to mix each of them, right? So there are some kits you need to mix individually everything, right? So here we go for one-step RT-PCR. You keep them in the machine just for a few minutes, 30 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and then you go to the real cycle. So why we are going for one-step reaction is that there is a chance for aerosol generation or cross-contamination. Anything can happen. So that's why everything should go into a one closed tubes. The other method is the two-step RT-PCR reactions. It is what we'll do is we'll mix the everything except the DNA Taq polymerase, and we keep them for cDNA conversion. And once cDNA conversion has happened, you can take some molecule of cDNA and use for real-time PCR. The only difference is we are doing two step here, there only one step, but the remaining everything is the same. So this is very important. For the conversion of RNA to cDNA, you can use random hexamers, which means that randomly nucleotides are 6 nucleotides are there, so they can go and bind to the any mRNA. So there are some reasons why we need to go for random primers. Whenever you going for a eukaryotic specific expressions, then you need to go for a random primers because they are quite long. The mRNA of eukaryotes are quite long, so you can go for it. If it is a prokaryote, you can go for oligo-DT, because you know that all the mRNA has a poly A. So that your oligo-DT means many T's will be there. They complement to each other. They'll go and bind and then drag the cDNA. And sequence-specific primers. Here, very important thing is when you go for a one-step RT-PCR, you need to use only sequence-specific primers. Please remember that. So what we are going to use is here is E gene or RDRP or S gene or E gene. So specific sequence-specific primer in the sense specific to coronavirus, specific to a human gene, like that. So there are three methods. What we will be using is a sequence-specific primers. So moving on to the real-time PCR. So there are two chemistry. One is 5' nuclease, other one is cybergreen. So what we will be using in coronavirus diagnosis mainly 5' nucleases because they are more sensitive. Because cybergreen chemistry can lead to some false positive because they'll show by binding to double-stranded DNA. So here how it works. Cybergreen is also a fluorescent dye. A Tagman is also contain a fluorescent dye. So this generally you can call them as a probe because Tagman is a patented one from Thermo. So what simply I'll put it is cybergreen can bind to any amplification double-stranded DNA is formed they'll go and bind, and then they start fluorescing. So as exponential amplification takes place, this fluorescence keep going up and up. So it will show a sigmoidal curve. Similarly, in case of Tagman, every amplification your reporter is cleaved from the quencher, so you will get the fluorescence at each cycle. So as I said earlier, like cybergreen, we are not using because they generally bind to any minor groove minor groove which is formed during the double strand formation of DNA. So if there is any non-specific amplification or even primer dimer, even like homodimer formation, they can go and bind and then form a fake fluorescence, and you may end up in saying the false positive. So to avoid that, we are generally going for a probe-based chemistry. So here I'm just simply tell you what is the principle here. So it works under the principle of FRET, that is fluorescent resonance energy transfer. What happened is that this is the probe, Tagman probe, which has a 5' reporter and 3' quencher. So what happens is, whenever they are in a closer proximity, whatever the repulse generated, that will be quenched by the if two friends is there, one friend is a bad guy, other one is a good fellow. So when in a classroom, everyone they will think that the bad fellow characters will be shown to everyone, so that the good guy, whatever character he has, it will not shown to the other people. So whenever he along with him, so other people will think that he's a bad fellow. The moment the both of them separated, all the goodness from that good guy will be shown. Then everyone think that, oh, this fellow is not bad, it actually is good. So like that, whenever this fluoropore is near to the quencher, all your fluorescence is quenched by the quencher. So that is called fluorescent resonance energy transfer. The moment they cleaved apart, all the fluorescence will be shown. That's how the real-time PCR works. And the main essential part of real-time PCR is three things. One is, as like PCR, you need a thermal cycler where like shift in the temperature, and you need a lamp where like the light source comes from and hit the tubes, and then the emitted light will go to the CCD camera and captured. Specific wavelength will be captured by the CCD camera or the photomultiplier tubes. So these are three essential parts: thermal cycler, lamp, and the detector. The detector is the CCD camera or photomultiplier tube. Each one has a different sensitivity. And this slide, I just wanted to tell you that the moment your light hits the tubes, there will be a different wavelength coming out of the tube that will go and detect to the CCD camera. So many of you may aware, but I just wanted to tell you like how the fluorescence principle works. So fluorescents are generally a substance which are emitted with a shorter wavelength, and they will excited and emit the longer wavelength. So it's simply absorb shorter wavelength and emit the longer wavelength. So you might have seen many radiums, right, in the nights. So that's how the fluorescent works. So we will be exciting the fluorescent dye with one wavelength. They will be emitting a different wavelength light that will be captured by the CCD camera. These wavelengths are dye specific. So there will not be any crosstalk between the dyes because these are different colors. So I'll just quickly show you how this works. So you need a two primers. This is a forward primer and a reverse primer. You need probe centrally bind to any one of the stand, right? So either the probe can bind to a forward stand or reverse stand, whatever it is, the way you want to design. So the moment the primers bind exactly to the target and your probe bind, what happens is slowly they tend to move. And these tag polymerase, what we are using, they are also having the nucleus activity. So they will cleave the reporter from the quencher. The moment it is cleaved, the fluorescence starts. So every time from the top, light will be keep coming. So the fluorescence will be coming from the tubes. So they are separated and then light comes out. So now you understood how this works, but really how this curves comes in and how it is exponentially keep increasing. You know that every cycles, if you have a one single copy of DNA at the RNA at the start, it will be doubling each time. Say from one copy to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 32 like that. So when there is exponential increase, there are also exponential increase in the fluorescence. You see, you just see both the curve as well as the fluorescence. So first one DNA target is there. one fluorescence comes, one light is coming out, two target, two fluorescence coming out. You see the green curve is keep coming up. So four fluorescence now. So the curve is crossing the threshold. Okay, finally many fluorescence keep coming.